All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're talking college football, and it's Rivalry Week. It's part 2. Yes, we're bringing you that second episode for this week. The week was just too much for one episode, so we got to bring you a second one here. And I'm joined by my co-host, the man who figured out the way Santa marks every single chimney which way he's visited. He keeps a log of them. My co-host, Fresh. Fresh, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, you got to know, just like in the movie Santa Claus, that's a true story. You got to know which ones have, chimneys and which ones you got to sort of adapt to and make them create out of thin air. So it's like you said, got to use a log.
Yeah, it's going to be a great weekend. If you guys haven't gone back and checked out part 1 of our Rivalry Week episodes, we covered all the games on Thursday and Friday. All of these games that we are covering today are going to be played on Saturday, and we have some big, huge matchups, playoff implications on the line here. This is exciting, man. Fresh, these are the most exciting games of the year. These are the games that for 364 days, if you do not win this game, the other side gets to talk and chirp at you for all of those days throughout the year.
Yeah, like bragging rights, it means a little bit more than anything. You got teams to be, 1-10 coming into this football game. If you win that ball game, you have bragging rights for the year. You pump your chest up. It's a big deal. There's trophies involved. There's everything, and families are divided over rivalries. Depending on where you live or your whatever school you went to, or just whoever you decided to start following when you were young. It's a big deal, and things can get kind of heated. Things can get kind of dramatic. It's not just like playing another team on your schedule. This is deep rooted stuff. And on top of it, when you get down to this point, conference championship game bids are on the line, or even conference titles if there's no title game. Those are set aside and on the line. Playoff spots are on the line. It's a lasting memory that has a big impact, and it's quite the eventful Saturday, especially if a couple of games on Friday that might impact the outcomes on Saturday. What how if they have more magnitude, bigger or lesser, and it's quite the showdown. You look at it where this rivalry is one of those people don't take it as seriously. I remember back to 2005 when Lou Holtz took South Carolina up to Clemson and they had a huge brawl on the field. And people remember that, like the players were literally taking helmets off and swinging at each other, fists were flying, like that. Were there? That's a kind of like the true disdain, and anger toward the opponent, and that's kind of what I think you're starting to see come back in this rivalry. The years that South Carolina was good under Spurrier, a little bit after that, Clemson was still sort of just getting their feet wet under Dabo. And it was sort of the end of Spurrier reign, a couple of years there, and the Dabo started to take over and get that program on track. And we really haven't seen this as a true elite versus elite in the state, but you still have to worry part of maybe that team can get us. I'm not saying South Carolina's back or at that level, but when you beat Tennessee the way they did, expectations for the fan base now are, hey, we can contend. We're ready. We can take on Clemson, especially since through the eye test, Clemson looks a lot less than what they were 2014, 15, 16, and 17 and 18, so on and so forth. This team looks vulnerable, and can Shane Beamer truly supplant South Carolina as a program on the rise? You got the upset over Tennessee, but now you're actually going to be hurt because of that, because now people expect a higher level of play. Can Spencer Rattler play at the level he played with this past Saturday there in Columbia? Can the receivers make the catches? Can the defense get off the field? Now you're looked at it like, hey, you've done it once. We know you can do it. Can you do it consistently? And Beamer last year, they got beat. It was his first year, really in that rivalry as the head coach. He'd been there as the assistant, and you sort of get that flavor of, all right, now I'm in it. Here we are. It's going to be interesting from Clemson's perspective because they have playoff hopes, and you saw the playoff committee rank them, maybe kind of shaft them up a little bit behind Alabama. And Clemson's going to have to really prove to the committee that they are worthy. Maybe if something's happened, if they are to slip up, make a couple of jumps, and get up into that top four. I think they're in a very tough spot now, but they would have to beat South Carolina very handily, and then beat North Carolina extremely handily, and North Carolina would have to beat NC State really to even boost that. Other things would have to happen, but they're going to have to play their perfect game. Eyes are going to be on them the entire time. They can't slack off and get lost, and this is a rivalry game we lost. They're going to have to be elite to sway voters. So you're going to see Dabo playing a little reckless and maybe calling off the dogs a little bit and saying, "Hey, we've got to let everything out. We've got to get after it." DJU, if you're struggling, we've got to pull the trigger and go with the backup because we can't afford a sluggish performance. We can't afford anything else. We've got to dominate the next 2 weeks, and starts with with South Carolina, especially with them elevating their play last week. I think the one interesting part is, how does South Carolina recover? Because that game, very emotional, a lot of excitement. Everyone's been patting them on the back ever since that game was at halftime, because that game was pretty well in hand early on. How do they adapt the week of practice to get ready for Clemson? Is Spencer Rattler a one-game wonder, or can he actually build off and be consistent? Because at times at Oklahoma, I think the reason why people kind of the luster wore off is because the team would win, but he wouldn't look perfect or look really good week in and week out. We kept waiting for it. 2020 had some games, then faded. 2021 had some games, then faded, and then he got benched. Can he put together 2 weeks in a row and really show that he's number one, a legit quarterback, but keep this offense humming? Because he was throwing passes, receivers are going up and making great catches. They were blocking for him, like they showed they could do it. And defensively, the athletes were all over the field. They were running with the defensive line, was getting some pressure on Hooker every once in a while, forcing a couple overthrows, made on Hooker uncomfortable, and that's why he had some bad passes where receivers maybe got some separation, but he just wasn't hitting on the route. And that just comes down to athletes being a little step for step, but also getting a little pressure, having a little extra speed on the defensive end. Where does that come into play? Clemson is not a passing team like they've been in the past. They are going to have to run the football, and maintain it that way and build off it with Shipley. Shipley's going to have to be the key. He's been the key all year. But he's going to have to be the guy, and you're going to have to get him in the passing game and the running game and use him in space to get a win. The crowd there in Death Valley is going to have to come into play. They're going to have to be loud. You have to give them an environment they struggle with. Where look what they did at Florida when South Carolina went there. Yeah, the Gators were having a tough time this year, but that crowd in the swamp was very intense, was lively. And it became an environment that South Carolina just couldn't handle when the game got out of control real quick. You jumped on them early, and the crowd took it from there, and the team took it from there. That's what Clemson has to do. South Carolina is going to have to be able to maintain their focus and not allow what happened last week to get too high and get too low. Just come in and play your game. You know you can do it. You've shown you can do it. They could really wreck a lot of plans and completely eliminate the ACC from anything if they take care of business and beat Clemson. If Clemson wins and they do it in impressive fashion, it keeps very faint hopes alive for a playoff spot. I mean, maybe 2%, 10% chance at max, but it still gives that hope. In the end, I'm going to trust Clemson in this game just because I think that they have the home advantage. They have a little more of an experienced team in South Carolina. We've seen the bad and we've seen the good. We've seen them get stopped by Georgia. We've seen them stopped by Florida and then put a miracle effort out versus Tennessee. I think it's just going to be too much to overcome. They're going to have too much of their pat on the backs. Clemson will get it done. It'll be a lot closer. I think maybe 3 to 5 point game somewhere in there. Not a blowout. So it won't help Clemson from that perspective. But it will not. It won't be an upset like it was last week. Clemson will get the job done and move forward to the ACC title game.
Fresh, this one is unique to me because if this game was a evening game, like let's say this was either a 4:30 kickoff or an 8 o'clock kickoff in Death Valley for Clemson, I would say Clemson rolls big time. This is a noon kick. and it's going to be in the middle of the day here. So I actually think that gives a little bit of help to the Gamecocks in this game because I don't think the crowd has enough time to be energized and really that ravenous crowd that you'll see at nighttime when Clemson's running down the hill and touching the Howard's Rock and coming down, and you see the energy that's in that stadium. There's a noticeable difference of the energy at Clemson for a day game versus a night game, and it's something that really kind of stuck out to me this year when I've watched Clemson. I look and see what South Carolina did to Tennessee if they want to have a shot at all. I know everyone under the sun is going to look at Spencer Rattler, 6 touchdowns, completing almost 80% of his passes. And that's a huge part of what they did. But they also limited the rushing attack. South Carolina is a bottom half defensively in the SEC. They're not the greatest defensive team. They do give up quite a few yards on the ground. And Jabari Small and Jalen Wright for Tennessee really struggled to get going in that game. Combined, they were only given 100 yards rushing. I think that maybe that might have been Tennessee's fault. Maybe you kind of blame Josh Heupel from going away from the run a little bit and making Hendon Hooker throw the ball 42 times in that game. But realistically, that's what South Carolina did. They got that lead in front. They had to play from ahead. We've talked about this. I think we talked a little bit more last year about it than we did this year about getting in these big games. If you want to pull an upset, you need to play from up front. And that's what South Carolina needs to do. They need to have another big game out of their team. So whether it's Bell, who's a tight end, who is their leading rusher in that game, or Wells having 11 catches for 177 yards there, you see all of these guys, not just Spencer Rattler, who stepped up for the Gamecocks. If those guys step up again, I like this game getting real competitive. Home field advantage is really going to come into play, I think, here in the long run. But I need to see a little more. I'm with you on this on the trusting part. If I'm Clemson, it's a heavy dose of Will Shipley. I know everyone, again, DJU, if he struggles, do you bring Klubnik in off the bench? I know Dabo has shown that he wants to use that 2 quarterback system. I don't like that idea. When you have 2 quarterbacks, you really have no quarterback. I don't like that 2 quarterback system. I'm not a fan of it. Never been a fan of it. DJU has been better than he was last year. I don't know. I think that bar was set really, really low for him. But here's my biggest problem here, Fresh. Coming into the season, we were so bullish on the Clemson defense, and they haven't been that shut down, just absolutely dominant defense that we thought that they could be. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. has been pretty darn good this season. And then Miles Murphy, who we both had talked about being a possibility, he's still probably a top 10 pick. He hasn't been like that absolute wrecking ball over there as well. I'm going Clemson on this one as well. I'm going to say that Will Shipley is really the difference maker. We're going to see Will Shipley get over that 1,000-yard mark in this game. But don't be shocked if South Carolina really hangs around with them at around halftime. If South Carolina can get out to a lead, if they can jump on Clemson, this game gets real interesting for me. I don't necessarily know if they can do that 2 weeks in a row. I think that's a large ask for a team like South Carolina, but hey, rivalry week, crazier things have happened.
Yeah, it's great you brought up the defense where, yeah, we thought they might have been a top 5, top 3 defense in the country. It's just they haven't got their flow. They've had a lot of things happening, off the field, injuries, and the guys haven't got built in. And then also, I think losing Venables, there's not that loss, him not being there to help guide the defense has been very evident. And he's struggling in Oklahoma, but his loss in the play calling with the players. It's a combination of the coaches and you always say like the Jimmies and the Joes, not the X's and the O's. I think this is a combination of where you have the Jimmies and the Joes, but you're also kind of missing the X's and the O's, and it's not a full fluid moment.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's an underrated thing when you lose a coordinator like Venables and how big of an impact he has had on missing that defense. But then you look at Oklahoma's defense. It's been rough at times this year. All right, Fresh, let's go to our next game. We're going to Manhattan, Kansas. It's Kansas Jayhawks. Uh, it's so weird for me to say that. Traveling to Manhattan, Kansas, playing the Kansas State Wildcats. All right, this is a 12-point favorite by Kansas State. Over under is set at 62.5. That's a lot of points. Kansas, huge on the year, kind of started off where the darlings of college football, and then they've lost 4 of the last 5 here. Kansas State, Fresh. Are we thinking that this is possibly, if they win this game, they're going to the Big 12 title game and getting another shot at TCU, which I don't know about you, I kind of really would like Kansas State's chances against that TCU team a second time around. Fresh, give me a little bit about Kansas State.
I mean, I think this is the first thing I put on my notes is can we all just pause and realize that this is an 8 o'clock kickoff on Fox, nationally televised game? I can't remember a Kansas State basketball game being the focal point, much less a football game as being the main broadcast for a premier network. So that's how important, how amazing both these teams have been all year. This rivalry goes back to 1902, pretty fierce. Kansas leads it all, but when they put the Governor's Trophy in place in the late '60s, that's when Kansas State has actually owned the series. They've been more prominent in the past 40, almost 50 years. So it's gone back and forth over the time. The second thing I sort of saw when I looked at this football game was Jalen Daniels came back last week versus Texas after being hurt for a few weeks, and that offense definitely took a downturn when he got dinged up and injured. And it's right around that time when they're peaking, they're having a great run. He was definitely the catalyst behind that offensive in that team moving forward. So him last week, Texas, I'll give him a pass. You sort of have to get back out there and the hits are coming again and getting the game action. But I think he's going to be a major difference maker when it comes to this football game because he's had a game under his belt now. He understands it's a big rivalry. And they're already bowl eligible, but you want to beat your rival, knock them out of a chance to play for a conference championship game. That's a big deal. That's exactly what a rivalry thing is. It's like, not only do I beat you, I keep you from playing for a championship in the conference. It's a double whammy and a huge bragging point, a huge momentum builder going into bowl season for a program that has come off the mat after some terrible seasons and has put together a solid year. He's gonna have to do it more than just himself, though. He's really going to need running back Devin Neal to be heavily involved. The two of them early in the year, where they really got this team going. Great quarterback being mobile, great running game. The two of them in the backfield creating opportunities on the edges and between the tackles, and then obviously opening up the play action pass from there. If they are on their game early in this football game, and then they can be consistent throughout, it's going to be a solid momentum push for the Jayhawks in this ball game. On the other side, Adrian Martinez is there, but it's Deuce Vaughn. He is the all be all, do it everything, the Swiss Army knife, and Kansas is going to have to find a way to limit. You cannot shut him down. You just have to limit his possessions. It's kind of like in basketball where a star player, they're going to get theirs. They're going to get their 25 to 30. You still want them to go for 50. You want to minimize the rest of the team on their approach. You just got to let him get his. Don't go crazy and take away everybody else, and you'll be able to be okay. And that comes into this play where you have Martinez and you have Vaughn. Vaughn's going to get his. You've got to take Martinez away and then minimize receivers. And you should have at least somewhat of a successful defensive plan against the Kansas State offense. That's where they've gotten in trouble on the season in their losses, which they've been few, but they've had inconsistencies in their offense where they've struggled and not been able to maintain a consistent, philosophy and press the entire football game. K-State is allowing 18.7 points a game. Kansas is allowing 32. That's the biggest discrepancy in this football game, is that defensive effort from Kansas is not up to par where their offense is. And Kansas State, they actually play defense. If Kansas State's given up in this football game 20 points or less, this is a blowout. Kansas has got to be able to score 24, 28 points, and they've got to have a little bit more of an effort defensively. Now, there's two ways you can go about it. You can have a great defensive effort. The guys are all on cue and they're watching film all week. Or your offense, instead of scoring fast, you try to slow it down, kill some clock, keep your defense on the sideline, let them rest, but you have to maximize those drives with touchdowns. You've got to play a team philosophy and not just we're going to score real quick and then sit back and put our defense back on the field. We were just talking about Tennessee. One thing they've done all year is, we mentioned it many podcasts ago, is that they were 121st in time of possession, but they're scoring a ton of points. And it's great if you're scoring quick and you're giving the ball back. But if you're not scoring and those drives are over in 3 plays, your defense is rushing back on the field and you're empty, and then you're going to eventually get exhausted as the wear and tear of the football game goes. So you have to, as Kansas has to be able to manage their offense and not score too fast, but they still need to score. Give your defense a break. Let them get some rest, because they're going to be running left and right and up and down, chasing Martinez and Vaughn all day long. Both teams are scoring 32 points a game, so the offenses are both there. It's just that Kansas defense develop and play their game of their season this week? We haven't seen it lately. They definitely did not play real well versus Texas last week, giving over 50 points. They're going to have to show up and play with a lot of pride and try to get this upset and really shake up the landscape. Because number one, like we said before, it keeps Kansas State out of the conference title game. It prevents them from potentially getting a championship under their belt, and it knocks them out of a pretty good bowl game, and it actually increases your bowl chances. There's a lot of positives there for Kansas. So Kansas State's going to be very wary in the Little Apple to be able to be focused and take advantage of it. It's a night game. I hope that place is full of purple, because that fans are coming out on Thanksgiving weekend and really showing up for their program. And the other biggest fear, though, I think TCU is probably rooting for Kansas State, because if Kansas State loses and Texas beats Baylor, Texas is now playing TCU for that title. And I can tell you right now, Texas left a lot on the field, and TCU didn't play very great offensively when they met a couple weeks ago in Austin. If they get a rematch, that Texas team might be a little re-energized and refocused for a rematch, and that might get them a chance to get that W and really blow up the college football playoff altogether. So TCU is rooting for purple. Kansas State's going to have to play with focus. Kansas, if you are there, play smart, play team organized football, and try to find ways to get touchdowns. Field goals will not get you this win. Daniels, do you have a little magic left in you? We saw it versus Houston early in the year. Do you have a little extra left in that tank to put on display this Saturday night with the lights are the brightest and get it done? And at the end, I think Kansas State finds a way to get it done. I think they have more offensive weapons consistently, and the defense is obviously better. But it should be an exciting football game for the full 4 quarters. But Kansas State gets it done, and we get an all-purple game in Jerry World the week after for the title.
Fresh, if Kansas is going to win this game, they got to play better defensively. If you take a look at their offense compared to their defense, they're actually at a negative yardage when it comes to how much yardage their defense has given up. That's a concerning part for me. The Jayhawks were the best when they were kind of at least in the positive aspect there. And Deuce Vaughn is going to be an absolute terror for them. They're going to need to have someone spying on him at all times in this game. I don't know yet, is Adrian Martinez playing in this game, because he was dinged up. I know that he hasn't been playing really in the last couple of weeks. I know he went out a couple games ago, but that's the intriguing thing, because Martinez has been really good, but Will Howard stepped in his place and maybe was a little bit better at times, and we'll see how he kind of plays as well. But again, this game is going to start and stop for Kansas State with Deuce Vaughn. Deuce Vaughn maybe is the best running back in college football that you haven't heard of if you haven't watched much Big 12 football. I really like Deuce Vaughn. I think that if he comes out this year, he has a good chance of being like the first running back taken, just because of his ability to run and catch the ball out of the backfield. You're going to need a huge game out of him. The last 3 games, he's hovered right around 4 yards a carry, kind of dipping into that 3.8, 3.5 yards a carry as well. That's a little bit concerning to me, because that means that they're not opening up the same level of holes that you saw them opening up earlier in the year. Again, for Kansas, it's going to come back to Jalen Daniels. If he's still feeling the effects of this injury, this game is out of action. It's done by halftime, and you guys can flip it off or change over to another night game. But if Jalen Daniels has that magic, if he's able to go to Manhattan and be where the lights are the brightest and kind of just walk down Broadway in Manhattan there, and I don't even know if Manhattan, Kansas has a Broadway, but if he's able to walk down Broadway and waltz around and show what he was able to do like he did at the beginning of the year, I think that Kansas has got a shot in this game. I don't give him a great shot here, but that 12 number is interesting to me. Why isn't it 14? I feel like that should be like a 14-point spread, especially being home, especially with Kansas reeling. I think it's interesting that the number's only sitting there at 12. I think Kansas does have a little bit of a shot with it, but for some reason, I'm with you. Kansas State's going to roll on this one. They're going to Jerry World. They're going to be playing in the Big 12 title game.
It's a good call out there by Will Howard. He has been the X factor down the stretch with Martinez dinged up. They haven't had an exact statement on Martinez in or out fully. There's also rumors that somebody, maybe jokingly, but they've gotten Will Howard here. If he's played enough games at this point, maybe redshirt the rest of the year, so you have him going forward. But I think he might have already passed that threshold. But he's definitely been kind of a dark horse there for that team, where I don't think they knew what they had in him, and he got on the field and he's been electric as well, and they really haven't missed a beat offensively.
All right, Fresh, let's go to the state of Alabama. The Iron Bowl. Auburn traveling to Tuscaloosa to play the Crimson Tide. Over-under of this game is set at 49, which I was kind of shocked and taken aback by that. Clutching my pearls, oh my goodness. And then Alabama is a 22-point favorite in this game. It's weird Iron Bowl here, man. Auburn fires their coach, and they win the next two games. And you take a look, they beat, Texas A&M, who's a dumpster fire in themselves, and Western Kentucky. You take a look at Alabama. Alabama, I know it sounds weird with two losses, but Alabama still has a shot at the college football playoff here, which is kind of bizarre to me, but they've picked themselves off the mat. They had that that 1-point loss to LSU, beat Ole Miss, beat Austin Peay last year. This is a 3:30 kick, afternoon kick. Iron Bowl's goofy, but especially with me, Fresh, I'm thinking that usually in this realm, I don't want to completely count the Auburn Tigers out, but I'm going to count the Auburn Tigers out.
The Iron Bowl, I think of all the rivalry games, the Iron Bowl is probably the craziest one, because there have been many occasions where the unranked team, who is barely at 6 wins, somehow plays the game of their life, historically going even way back, even before the Bear, and makes it really like a one-score game, or they end up pulling off the upset, whether it's special teams on, punting and taking punts to the house, or blocking kicks, or taking missed field goals, 106 yards for a touchdown, or it's just the crazy things pop out. And you look at last year, Alabama's team was pretty good, and Auburn made them look average in that ball game, and it took overtime and Bryce Young miracles to survive the Plains and keep themselves alive in the college football playoff and in the SEC championship, discussion. They had no business being in the football game. The Auburn team last year was pretty terrible as well, and they drew it all up and they brought up the energy. That's where it's just weird. You get a weird thing happens where you could have we talked about it at the very beginning. You could have a 3-8 team show up, and they will beat an 11-1 team or a 10-1 team on that given day. It doesn't happen as many times in other situations, but the Iron Bowl just seems to have that weird vibe. The other part is this Bryce Young's last ever game. Because if they don't make the playoff, does he sit? Does he just take himself out? That's been a viable thought process where he's definitely taken a beating the past 2 years with having an offensive line that hasn't been as sturdy, and maybe you save your body to get yourself ready for the draft. That's up for debate. Cadillac Williams, the interim coach, as a player at Auburn, when he was on the team, he was 3-1 there. They lost this freshman year and they won the next 3 years. And the second season, very eerily, they went Tuscaloosa. Alabama was number 9 in the country. Auburn was unranked, and Auburn won 17-7. So very similar here. Alabama's a top 10 team. Auburn's not ranked. Game's in Tuscaloosa. Just putting it out there. So he knows what this means about. He knows what it means to win this rivalry. He's been a part of it his entire life. He's coached on the sideline. He's been as a player. He has that Auburn mentality where the guys understand. It's a little different than what you had there, probably from Brian Horson, Gus Malzahn, anyone who's been there recently. Where he's an Auburn guy, he understands it. He's been through it, and the players are driven with him. Obviously, he's inspired. Yeah, it's A&M. Yeah, it's Western Kentucky. But the players played with energy in both those football games that we hadn't even seen maybe in a year and a half, where they had the juice. to really want to step up and play football for full 60 minutes for a coach for each other. So that's an unwritten thing that we have coming to this football game. Where's that motivation coming from? Alabama's not playing for an SEC title. Their odds of making the playoff are slim to none. There's a lot of things that would have to happen. They're actually ironically rooting for Georgia to beat LSU handedly and other things to happen. So they need a miracle themselves. Do they play with as much energy and fire in this football game at home? Who knows? They've been exposed all season long. There's definitely times they've looked like Alabama. There's definitely times they've looked like just an average football team. Can Auburn take advantage of that? And then you have the other drama that's sort of out there in the backwoods is Lane Kiffin the next Auburn head coach? How do the Auburn players respond to that? Do they want to pay? They already know they're playing for a potentially new coach. Are they playing to impress and maybe Cadillac the job? Or are they playing for playing time for the future if whoever that is named that head coach becomes that coach? There's a lot of extra drama around this football game. We already did our part one preview about the Egg Bowl, but it's funny that the sports director for Starkville, Mississippi, is the one that leaked the story about him going to Auburn in the first place the week of the Egg Bowl. So just there's controversy all over which team's actually paying attention, which team is actually focused. It finds me, and looking at all the extra stuff, and stats don't matter in this football game, it still finds it very tough that this Auburn football team, of everything we've seen at this point, can manufacture a full 60 minutes to beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa. It's not like last year where you're at home, you had the crowd behind you. It's a different, vibe there in Jordan Air. I think Tuscaloosa is just, they're ripe. They want to see a win. They want to have a send off of Bryce. It's going to be a celebration. It's also potentially Will Anderson's last ever game, playing for the Tide as well. So I think the two of them come out, they put it together, and they win handily. It's going to be a first half. It's going to be close, and they're going to pull away, and they're going to win by 3 touchdowns in the second half. I don't think Auburn has enough playmakers to even make the magic happen in this one.
Fresh, there's a song from the movie Footloose called Holding Out for a Hero or I Need a Hero. And the opening lyrics of it says, "Where have all the good men gone and where are all the gods? Where's the streetwise Hercules to fight the rising odds?" I am thinking that exactly for the Iron Bowl here. Where are all the guys that we were talking about for 5-star prospects that have been recruited to Alabama and Auburn? And then you talk about this, where are all the gods? Like Saban has been considered a god as a coaching thing. And last time he's lost 2 regular season games this year. You want to talk about a streetwise Hercules that steps up. You see the guys from Auburn who do step up that aren't like the talk of everything in college football. And it seems like the odds are getting heavier and heavier for Auburn in this game. It's a crazy one, and if Auburn's got a chance, it's going to be on the legs of Tank Bigsby for me. I mean, you take a look at what Ashford's done for Auburn here right now, man, and dude's completing less than 50% of his passes. So really, it's going to come down to Tank Bigsby in this game, and the defense. If the defense comes to play and doesn't give up a bunch of yardage to Bryce Young and Gibbs over there for Alabama, then Auburn's got a shot. But they got to really play for something here. Like, this has got to be a hero mentality that they have to come in and play with. Auburn has had a terrible season, and there's no way around it. If you're an Auburn fan and you don't say that you've had a terrible season, you're not being realistic with yourself. From everything that happened at the beginning of the season, during the off season, with the scandal that happened with the administration, all of that stuff involving the coach, you gain shellacked by Penn State, and then all of a sudden you just kind of go in this tailspin, losing 6 games. All wrongs are righted if you win the Iron Bowl. Alabama, you're teetering. There's a level of pressure on Alabama right now. And I know people don't want to say this. It's the elephant in the room that is the Crimson Tide. No one wants to say this. What happens if Alabama loses this game? That's 3 regular season losses, 2, and then you also lost to your rival in the Iron Bowl. Yikes. That's a rough one here. So both of these teams kind of have this weird thing to play for here, and both teams need a hero. They need someone to rise up in this game and take it over, that they all of a sudden are part of the legend and the lore that goes with the Iron Bowl here. I don't know who's going to win this game. I'm going to say Alabama's going to win this. That 22 number's really high for me, though. That's 3 touchdowns plus. I don't like that. I think the game's closer than that. I think that Cadillac Williams is going to give one heck of a pregame speech. I think guys are going to be ready to run through a brick wall for that dude. And that's the same thing I keep thinking about. I think that it's the whole idea about punching through a brick wall. Like, a single person can't knock over a brick wall, but it's going to take the entire team. It's going to take the entire team to get through what's going to take to beat the Crimson Tide in this game. It wouldn't completely shock me if Auburn wins this game, because I'll understand that they had something to play for and that they wanted this more than Alabama. Man, Alabama, we got to have a long talk about Alabama if they lose this game. We have to have a very long talk about the offseason, and we're going to be talking quite a bit about Alabama all summer long if they lose this game, because this is the difference of going, even if they don't make the playoff, they'll go to New Year's Day 6. They don't win this game, Duke's Mayo Bowl is where you're at. I don't know, man. Yeah, I don't know, man. This is a crazy one for me. So I'll say Alabama, but who knows?
It is interesting, though, the 03 and 04 Auburn teams, what really made them roll was the 2 running back system of Ronnie Brown and Cadillac. Now, Auburn does have Tank Bigsby and they have Hunter, 2 very good, talented running backs. Can they take that in there and just run the football, the 2 of them, just wildcat it out all day long, and just give them crazy looks, pull it all the stops? It's going to be interesting to see. Now, there's another thing I was thinking about while you were talking about. I was trying to ignore your music lyrics, but this kind of also I wish we had like a Steve Spurrier kind of petty person, like a Lane Kiffin or something like that, who would say some crazy stuff in this rivalry, instead of being so stoic. It would really be funny if Nick Saban came out one day and was like, we got 2 losses by 3 points. It's a lot better than losing by 30 to South Carolina. Like, that right there would be amazing material in a press conference.
I just can't believe you don't like my song lyrics here.
It's fantastic. It definitely caught me. I mean, I don't want you to sing it because we'd probably lose listeners, but the reciting of it was okay.
Yeah, Bonnie Tyler, man. That's some classic stuff right there. All right, Fresh. Well, we'll pass on to me talking about Footloose and Kevin Bacon. All right, so we're going on to game number 4, the game that was formerly known as the Civil War. Oregon Ducks traveling to Oregon State, the Beavers. Whew, boy, howdy. This is a 3:30 kickoff. This is right after the game. Oregon is a 3-point favorite. Over-under is set at 58 points at the time of record. Let's break it down here, Fresh. Bo Nix, man, it stinks because the dude was a Heisman kind of sleeper. He was going to, I don't think he was going to win the Heisman, but he definitely had put up enough to kind of get the courtesy invite to New York and say, hey, you get to sit there and, hey, you had a really great year, but you're not going to win the Heisman type of thing. And then you take a look at the Beavers, man. The Beavers have had a very interesting year. Their 3 losses are all to really good teams. They lost close to USC. They got boat raced by Utah at Utah, and then they lost to Washington. The only game they've lost at home was really close to USC. There's some talent on this Oregon State team. But to me, with Oregon State, the difference between the two of these is Oregon State is a true team mentality. There's not a single player that we're going to say, like, hey, yeah, you could talk about Damian Martinez, the running back. You could talk about Jaden Grant, the defensive back. You could talk about all of these different guys. But they're pieces to a bigger picture to me with Oregon State. The Ducks, on the other hand, you're going to always talk about Bo Nix. You're going to talk about Bucky Irving over there. But it's always going to be the individual, Troy Franklin, the wide receiver. I don't know. I kind of want to take the Beavers in this game. I think they're going to build a dam around the end zone, and the Ducks are going to be searching for the water. I don't know though.
You know, if this was the Army Navy game, we'd say damn the torpedoes. But in this case, we're just going to damn the lake because we got beavers and ducks.
Quack quack quack, Mr. Duckworth.
The coolest thing about this is for the Beavers, especially. This is a special season for them. Like Oregon, I think people didn't know what to expect. Whether they're going to have really talent or they're just going to be a mediocre football team. But Oregon State, this is the most wins they've had in a season since 2012. It's been a decade since they've been like this relevant, this aggressive, this successful. It's been an emotional roller coaster because those 3 losses where they played USC really tight and they only lost by 3 to Washington. Those are 2 games. They could be even a bigger spectacle right now. Really be the darlings of college football if they had found ways to win those football games. The Utah game, that's a whole different story. That's like, your best score and worst score dismissed. You get rid of that Utah one, just, recite it and move on. But having the best football season and have a chance to really improve on it in over a decade is, number one, good for recruiting. Number 2, it shows that you are a relevant football program. And what you're trying to do, what you're trying to build there is paying off. And it's not just, they're another school in the state. They're not the Phil Knight University over there that has 1,000 different uniforms. They are a legit football team that's actually putting stuff together. They aren't a baseball school. And the only time that school actually matters in athletics is, come the spring. They're a football team and they're playing well. They're scoring 32 and they're giving up 20. The defensive effort, especially in the Pac-12, where defense is optional, is being nice. They're pretty terrible overall across the board defensively. So Oregon State only giving up 20 points a game is them and Utah are, head and shoulders above everybody else. And that actually gives them a legit shot in this football game. You're already at home. You're in Riser Stadium where eerie things happen when top-ranked teams, higher-ranked teams come in. Either it's a close football game or sometimes they pull off upsets. Ask USC. Can this game, which is a rivalry already, be magnified by a better defensive effort on their end? Bo Nix, a little beat up, still trying to recover from the way that the Washington game ended. They didn't look exactly fully healthy and fully functioning versus Utah. They did exercise those demons, but you got to figure there's still something lingering there with Bo Nix. He's trying to battle through it and give them everything he possibly can to keep their hopes alive for a win in a Pac-12 title. And where's that come into play in this football game? And how many possessions does Oregon get? Because Oregon State, you mentioned Damian Martinez, but the team is averaging 192 yards rushing a game. They are putting the football on the ground. They're 3, 4, 5 yards a carry, maintain that clock, playing the games on their terms, limiting offensive possessions for the opponent. And that's where that 20 points a game allowed comes into play, where you're not giving up opportunities. And if they're going to score, they're going to have limited chances. They're not going to score every possession. So you're going to be able to build that game and play it on your own terms and not let the opponent dictate to you. And that's how they've played so far this season. It's been very successful. It's a pretty good philosophy. If they do have to throw, though, in the limited times they do, Trayshawn Harrison's 589 and 4 touchdowns. He's that number one target that's going to have to be involved, and he's going to have his name called a few times. They're not going to be able to win this football game 20-17 like Oregon did versus Utah. They're going to probably win it, like if they do, a 24-20, 27-22 sort of 21 sort of game like that, where Oregon's going to get some points, but you're going to have to be able to minimize those opportunities and score every time you have the football. You have the talent defensively and offensively to do it, but they're going to have to play the best game of their season and hope that Oregon's defense has a letdown effort and that Bo Nix maybe not on his A game like he's been pretty rare. You want the Auburn Bo Nix to show up in this football game. You don't want the Oregon Bo Nix to show up. If Oregon Bo Nix is fully healthy, shows up, I think over time the Ducks just get it done because that offense has been clicking so well all season. Is the pressure going to get to Oregon, though? You saw it versus Washington where the coaching and the game late down the stretch, they weren't fully there and they blew an opportunity to control their own fate. Last week, they exercised some demons. They played a little tight. They won the game at home, but it wasn't a pretty effort. If they win this football game, they go play USC for the Pac-12 title. If they lose, the season kind of just feels empty. It just, like you laid a big dud down the stretch. They recovered from the opening game versus Georgia, and everyone had expectations. They were playing real well, but if you lose 2 of the last 3 like this, it feels like it's a lost cause season. So I think that also needs to come into the factor of Dan Lanning coaching his guys up. You can't let this season just go away and just die. You've got to have a chance to control your own destiny, take advantage. Unlike what you did versus Washington, you've got to learn from those situations and play a better full 4 quarters. Oregon State, you got nothing to lose. Nobody expects you to win. Play a little looser and play a little freer. You're at home. You're sleeping in your own bed. It's just you have nothing to worry about except just go out there and win. Nobody wants you to win. Nobody expects you to win. And if you do, you really cause chaos across the board. And you beat your rival and have a whole year of bragging rights. So, um, it's going to be one of those interesting games where it's going to come down to the fourth quarter. I think you're going to have craziness. You're going to have maybe a blocked field goal or a blocked punt. Uh, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to call the upset. I'm going to say Oregon State gets it done. I just don't feel that Bo Nix is healthy enough. And I saw there's too many blips in the radar the past 2 weeks that I just don't know if they have enough left in the tank down the stretch. And I think the Beavers get it done. They take down the Ducks in a big upset.
Fresh, I really wish that I could do a pretty good Hank Hill impersonation and say, "Damn it, Bobby," because you took my pick here, Fresh. Because I was gonna sit there and say Oregon State because I thought that you would definitely pick Oregon in this game, and damn it, Fresh, I wanted to pick Oregon State and not you have that pick. Here's the thing with it. Oregon State's played this amazing like ball control offense, and there's like little pieces that you can see why they're so successful. And again, it's so bizarre to me because in the day of college football, where it's always like one or two players on your team that you're like, oh man, wait till you like Deuce Vaughn for Kansas State. We know that Deuce Vaughn's a really good running back, and he's going to lead Kansas State. And then you see whether it's Alabama, we were talking about Bryce Young, or Auburn, we're talking about Tank Bisbee. If I can get that name out right now. With Oregon State, they're just really efficient. They're really efficient. The one little stat that I thought, and I thought of Coach McCord, who listens to the podcast here, when Oregon State returns a punt, they're averaging almost 13 and a half yards per punt return there. So they're picking up an extra first down and then some. And how much special teams comes into play and means for Oregon State. The fact that you can get those extra yards. And I looked at Oregon comparing the two of them, and Oregon is averaging just like 6 yards per punt return. And they've only returned like 12 punts on the season, which I thought was kind of fascinating with the Ducks there. Frisch, I really, really, really want to pick Oregon State. And I'm going to pick Oregon State because I think that being at home, I think that they just are going to be too much for the Ducks. I think that this is going to be a team mentality. And I think that Oregon is overlooking the Beavers. I don't know how you can do that, but you are. And I think that Oregon's sitting there with their eyes on getting to the Pac-12 title game and having a chance at this thing and get some retribution. And they're going to miss out. I think they're going to miss out on this one. You shouldn't overlook your rivals, and I think that all the talk has kind of been for Oregon has been past this game. So give me the Beavers, and I think this game's going to be a lot of people are going to wake up Sunday morning going, "What in the world happened there on the upper north in the Pacific Northwest?" So give me Oregon State with you, Fresh, and damn it, Bobby.
I think the funny one is who who does USC actually match up better with? If that ever comes out, we can figure that one out next week. But when you look at playoff needs, where Washington is mid 15, 14, somewhere in there, and Oregon's what 12. So neither of the ranking is too high where it's going to be a major impact. But both those rivalry games, the Apple Cup and the Civil War, which of those ranked teams look good and give a higher ranking to USC to make that championship game actually have a little more flair and cook to it? Because they're going to need all the help they can get with ranked wins. And it's going to be interesting to see how both those rivalry games play out. And if Washington State and Oregon State both pull off upsets, that actually hurts USC the most.
It's hard for me not to quote some Guns N' Roses when we're talking about Oregon State. So what's so civil about war anyways? All right, Fresh, let's go to the next thing. I'm on it today.
Your
So
fault. You're got it today. You're on music trivia all out.
I love it, man. All right, let's go to our night game. This is going to be the big matchup. I can't wait for this game. I'm super excited about this one. Like, get your popcorn ready. Let's go. Notre Dame pulling themselves out of oblivion. And I mean, the Irish were left for dead this season. They're up to number 15 in the country. They're traveling to the the city of the stars, LA, facing the USC Trojans. They're up to number 6. This is a huge game for both of these teams because the playoff door is wide open for USC. And they have probably the best road and maybe the toughest road, but the best road to get to the college football playoff. I think they're one of the few teams that can pick up 2 really big rank wins in the next 2 weeks here between Notre Dame and whoever they would face and they're guaranteed a spot in the Pac-12 title game right now. So this is a fascinating one. USC is a 5.5-point favorite. Over under is set at 64.5. Both of these teams are absolutely rolling. Notre Dame has really figured some stuff out here. Had a great, huge win against Clemson. USC went to Westwood and won in a shootout against UCLA. Oh man, I'm excited here, Fresh. Let's see if you take my pick on this one, though. All right, Fresh, what you got going for in Trojans versus Irish?
Well, I think first off, Marcus Freeman and that entire Notre Dame football program need to double check the sidelines and make sure that Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush are nowhere near the field. We don't need any more push bushes to steal and break hearts in this rivalry. But this game, I think you mentioned, the 2 ranked teams they could potentially play down the stretch, giving them a huge boost for the committee to really evaluate. Now, the one thing that the committee said tonight when we were, I watched the releases, they still have a serious questions on the USC defense. The offense is fantastic. Caleb Williams, receivers, they're high flying. But that defense, pretty painful. I mean, you force 4 turnovers to UCLA, you still go 41 points. That's kind of rough. They haven't actually played great defense all year. They've had a lot of close calls, giving up points, in stretches and having to really struggle through and find some wins. That's the biggest question mark. Can that team improve on that side of the football? Notre Dame's offense is not exactly lethal. Will they look better and USC defense actually step up versus Notre Dame? That's a huge thing for the committee and I think everybody to watch. But also on their side, they're actually going to be playing a legit defense. Notre Dame's defense is better than just about everybody in the Pac-12. How will Marcus Freeman and that defense, those 2 great, J.D. Bertram at linebacker, you got Joseph at safety, you have the great defensive line they have there. It's just how are they going to adapt to the athletes at all 3 levels who are organized? Look what they did week 1 versus Ohio State. Granted, they had an entire offseason to prepare for the football game, but they showed up there. They took care of North Carolina. They took care of Clemson. They shut down the running attack from Syracuse. They have been very successful in making adjustments and getting better defensively, and the offense has sort of come along as the football season happened. Notre Dame, this is a rival. They have nothing to lose. They're not in the playoff hunt. If they lose another game, people are like, well, you know what? We all expected them to lose this football game. And my preview, I honestly thought Notre Dame would be 11-1 or 10-2 at the end of the year, and this game would be the second loss, or they would find a way to prevail and move forward and make the playoff. Just obviously, if anyone picked Marshall and Stanford to beat Notre Dame at the beginning of the year, you either had the almanac from Back in the Future, or you just were the one person out of the 50 people in line that decided to pick against Notre Dame. This football team has shown growth. There have been a lot of ups and downs. They have ugly wins, but they've gotten better as the season has gone on. I think that's the same thing with USC. They have gotten better as the season has gone on. Both these teams have progressed. Instead of peaking too early, they are growing in momentum as the season has gone on, and they've gotten through hiccups and pain points. And I think that's also what makes this game so intriguing is you're seeing 2 teams that are rising up. New head coaches, their first real year, teams that we expected to be talented, but they've had clunky moments and they've kind of grown together as a unit as we move forward in the year. Notre Dame's offense doesn't give me as much excitement at this point still. Michael Mayer, still a fantastic tight end. The running game, they've had moments where the offensive line's taken over football games. Other times where you're kind of head scratching your hair like, why can't you get 10 yards? USC, that offense, Caleb Williams looked phenomenal versus UCLA. He was running all over the field with his legs, with his eyes, with his arm. The receivers were doing their thing. They looked unstoppable to an extent. They kind of remind me of Tennessee, where they have the offensive pieces all over the place, but can a defense stop anybody? That's actually probably the best comparison I can make. Is USC looks very almost similar to Tennessee. Their offense is unstoppable. Can they defense get a stop in the football game and keep the team in the football game early to allow them to build a lead and then tail off? It's gonna be a battle of the wills in this ball game. Does USC get too big for the moment? Do they look ahead to a Pac-12 title game? Are they more concerned about winning a Pac-12 championship or playing for a potential national championship? There's a lot of impact there. If they make the playoff, you're thinking, like we mentioned before, the national title game's in LA, not too far away from they play their home games in the Coliseum. Do they get too big of the hype of the moment of like, we could play a national championship game at home, we've got to get this, and this done? They start overthinking the situation because everyone on that football team, offensively, none of them have been in a situation like this before. Outside of Lincoln Riley, the head coach, being in the playoff, none of the players have been anywhere close to it. How do they react? Do they get too big for the moment, or are they still like? Do they find ways to mentally mature and understand the situation and take it one game at a time? Notre Dame has nothing to lose. I think they play a little freer, but in the end, I think USC has too many offensive weapons, and they find a way just enough to get it done. And USC grabs another W and moves on to Vegas to take on whoever they will face in the Pac-12 title game.
Yeah, I'm waiting for you to say that someone's getting too big for their britches here, Fresh. I feel like that was the saying that I was waiting for to come out from you.
No, not yet. We'll save it for next week.
Okay, so at the end of the day, this game's going to come down to turnovers. USC is plus 20 in the turnover battle here, and Notre Dame is dead even. I think that that's going to be a huge factor. If USC is able to force Drew Pine into some turnovers, if he struggles, he's been an okay quarterback. He really has protected the offense. It's been the Notre Dame rushing attack with the three running backs that have really kind of carried them here. I really like Logan Diggs a lot. He's probably my favorite out of the three. I feel like he's very tough. He's coming off a big game versus Boston College. But you're right. It's going to be the Notre Dame defense. If the Notre Dame defense can stop USC's offense, if they can match up, if the matchup between Jordan Addison versus Benjamin Morrison, it's going to be an interesting one to watch on the outside. Morrison held his own in that Clemson game. Going back to that, kid's got 5 interceptions on the year. That kid's a legit cornerback right now. Also, Isaiah Foskey is the name that you are looking for the Notre Dame defensive line. If he can sack Caleb Williams a few times, watch out. I think that this game could be very, very tough for the Trojans. I think that this is going to be the type of game where you're going to miss having an experienced runner like Travis Dye. That Dye injury a couple of weeks ago really hurts Notre Dame, or really hurts USC. Austin Jones has stepped in nicely for them. I don't trust him as much as I trust Travis Dye. I know Austin Jones is a senior there, but I think it puts way too much pressure on Caleb Williams when you're in a 3rd and 2 or a 3rd and 3 situation. Most of the time, Notre Dame's going to be able to play some sort of pass defense because they don't have a running back that they can really comfortably turn and hand the ball off and feel very comfortable to pick up those 2 to 3 really tough yards. Travis Dye had that experience and had that level of getting those tough yards. I don't necessarily know if Austin Jones has that in him. He's a nice running back. I think it's going to be a tough matchup for Notre Dame on early downs. I'm talking about that when it's gut check time and we really see that your strength versus strength. We're going into your teeth of your defense, and I'm going to line up and try to smack you in the mouth. Can Austin Jones do it? I want to see it. I want to see it in this game. For Notre Dame offensively, though, man, I got to go back to this. Who's going to match up Michael Mayer? This could be a huge game for Michael Mayer. USC has done a really great job at getting to the quarterback and controlling things on the fringes of their passing attack. Shane Lee, the linebacker, good linebacker. They have good linebackers in USC. Can Shane Lee hang with Michael Mayer? That's going to be the matchup. That line, you're going to match up a linebacker against the tight end there. If he's able to match up, I think USC wins. If Notre Dame can limit their turnovers, if they can control the pace of this game, they're going to have to play this game exactly like they played Ohio State to begin the season. I think that game plan would work wonderful for USC here. USC has some athletes. They have some players in this game. I think that USC is just a little bit too much. If this game was in the shadows of touchdown Jesus, I think that Jesus heals all wounds, but the game is out in LA and the stars shine brightest. And I think that there are more stars in USC than there are at Notre Dame right now. So I'm taking the Trojans in this game. Trojans are always good for one time. So you're going to sit here. I'm taking the Trojans, and I'll take a little bit more than that 5.5.
It's funny how Clemson and Alabama are actually rooting for Notre Dame, because if USC takes a loss here, that gives them even more life. So it's funny how it's the teams who hated and feared Alabama are now in the same boat. Alabama struggled and Alabama was great, Clemson was great, and now they're both praying for Notre Dame, who they both have beaten many times in the past, to save them and give them an extended season.
All right, Fresh, let's go to the game of the week, the rivalry that is known as just by those two words, the game. The Michigan Wolverines traveling down to Columbus to face the Ohio State Buckeyes. Both teams 11-0 on the season. Ohio State is a 7.5-point favorite. Over under is set at 56 points in this game. Both teams coming in almost feeling like they're both limping in here. Blake Corum only getting one carry in the second half last week in a very tight Illinois game. You've seen Travion Henderson for Ohio State in a walking boot at the end of Maryland game. Mayan Williams didn't even dress. This is a scary game for me here, Fresh, because this game is always interesting. But now that both teams are 11-0, both teams are looking at getting themselves to Indianapolis. Both teams are looking at, they win this game, they're almost a shoo-in to go to the college football playoff. And Ohio State's at a spot where they're not used to. They have to get some revenge for last year. That has not happened in quite a few years, that they're coming off of a season that they lost to Michigan. I got my thoughts here, Fresh. I'll leave it to you, though, first.
Well, first, I'm confused, actually, because you sent me an email that said the best game of the weekend and Big Ten, and then you put ... Indiana, Purdue. So why are we talking Michigan, Ohio State? I'm just kidding. This has been the game I think everyone's had on their radar for 11 and a half months, maybe even full 12 months, going back to events that occurred in Ann Arbor during the Saturday Thanksgiving weekend last year. We knew that the Big Ten, it runs through these two programs, and even this year, even if anyone had come from the West, we didn't see the winner of the West having any competition against either of these teams when they had to face Indianapolis. These are the two juggernauts, and they have gone through the ups and downs all season long and have really shown that they're very resilient. Now, when I say ups and downs, I think Michigan has dealt with the shadow of what happened in the Orange Bowl last year and the rumors of, can they actually compete? Are they truly elite? They lost a lot of players. Are they the same team, or it was just a one-year wonder? This year, they've steamrolled just about everybody they've played. They've had very few blips on the radar, much less competition. And it's not because they played terrible teams, it's because they've actually attacked, dominated from start to finish. You've seen Blake Corum go from being the 1B running back to 1A Heisman candidate, and really taking over and being the focal point of that offense and making sure that this team gets it done. You saw McNamara get benched. We all thought, well, maybe McCarthy. Is he actually better? Is McNamara better? McCarthy and McNamara, in my opinion, have been the same guy. They have been absolutely fantastic, but they haven't been terrible. They've been consistent. They move the football. They keep the offense in good situations. And defensively, they haven't missed a beat. They have played just as great. You don't have the names of Hutchinson or Ojibwa and Hill in the defensive backfield. You have a collective unit of guys who are getting out there, getting sacks, getting tackles, getting off the field, not giving up points. Their rankings, their stats, there's a reason why they're there. They do their job. But this is the biggest test for that Michigan team, top to bottom. On the other side, Ohio State, we kind of worried. With all this talent, can they stay healthy? Especially in the first game, JSN got hurt. Haven't seen him play all year. Which of those receivers are going to step up and show that they could actually thrive in the offense? I think we figured that out, that they're going to be just okay at the wide receiver spot. Marvin Harrison and company have connected really well with C.J. Stroud. Running back situation, it was supposed to be Trayvon Henderson. He was supposed to be the guy. Yeah, he's had some issues with health, but he's been off the field. Williams has stepped up and actually taken the reins, but then he's had his health issues. And then last week we saw the third string running back take over and do it just fine. They have depth at every position. They can get it done. And that's been, I think, the biggest thing is getting to this point healthy and getting this game ready to play. Defensively, we didn't know what Knowles was going to bring. We saw what he did at Oklahoma State last year. What was this defense going to be like when they showed up this season and played? They've played great. You've seen vast improvements every single week, whether it's tackling in open space, which getting pressure on the quarterback, forcing turnovers, limiting points. They're a top 10 defense, and they've shown it week in and week out. And I think that's the one thing that they didn't have last year that was really the biggest difference when they got beat up in Ann Arbor, is that the Wolverines ran the ball down their throats. I don't know if it's supposed to snow or misty rain or whatever's supposed to happen this week in Columbus, but I think if the weather does come into play, Ohio State's better suited offensively and defensively to handle it. But Michigan's going to need all the help they can get to run that football and play who they are. The keys to the football game, though, Ohio State, there's no more excuses for being pissed off. We heard it all about Michigan ducking you in 2020 and then losing last year. I don't think anyone wants to hear the story of we're mad and we blew opportunities. This is your chance. You're at home. You have a better defense. You have a veteran quarterback and receivers. It's a chance to get it done. You have to play at your pace. You need to dictate the football game. Last year, Michigan dictated to you. They put it on their pace. They ran the football. They let the weather turn nasty, and it became a downfall in the end. This week, you've got to come out throwing and running, high velocity, high pace, stretch the defense, put the pressure on them, and score touchdowns early. Take that running game out. Michigan, in my opinion, still hasn't shown they can throw the ball to win a football game. If you put this game up 10 or up 14, you put them out of reach because they cannot score fast enough. That's what you have to do. Play it on your terms, score fast, score early, score often, and show that you're a dominant football team. We saw it leading into the football game last year, and then you disappeared because of the weather, but also because of Michigan defense. You can't let that happen this time. Michigan, if you want to win, you've got to be physical. You've got to show that you're not scared. We've heard message boards this week. All the Michigan fans are like, oh my God, we're going to get beat by 50. The season's over, blah, 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 this and blah, 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 that. Who cares? Deal with it. Play on your terms. Run the football. Be physical. You're going to have to win an ugly football game if you're going to win, or Ronnie Bell's going to have to show up and have the game of his life. But you have to play on your terms. You cannot let Ohio State chuck the ball down the field. Look at what Notre Dame did defensively. Look what Penn State did defensively. Play that into your philosophy. Come out there with something different that they haven't seen. Play with a reckless abandon. I know we hear this whole thing of Jim Harbaugh's great with his speeches. Well, Jim, you're going to have to give a heck of a speech, and really teams have to buy in and play your best game, because the committee also has a lot of doubts. If Michigan loses this football game and by more than a touchdown, you're probably out of the playoff and there's no chance for you to get in. If Ohio State loses, especially in a close situation, there's a viable option that Michigan and Ohio State both make the playoff. So there's a lot. You have no room for error if you're Michigan. You have got to play your best football game, probably your best football game in the past 2 years, maybe even better than what you did last year, because you're on the road and you have more of a hostile environment. When it comes down to it, I think Ohio State boat races Michigan. I don't think it's close. I just don't think Michigan has a passing attack to keep up if this game gets out of control.
Fresh, this is a game that I always take pause for, because Ohio State is limping into this game. I'm very nervous about the injury stuff on it. So there's some reports out there that Mayan Williams looks like he's going to suit up for this game. I think if you're an Ohio State player, you don't miss this game for anything. Like, this game is the game for you. You're going to leave it all out on the field for this one. Same thing goes with Michigan. Blake Corum, if he can go, he's going to go in this game. I think that Blake Corum's banged up, and I think that losing him, how healthy is him? I was talking to my dad about this game coming up, and he said, is Blake Corum 80%? I said, Dad, every player is 80%. Is Blake Corum at a 45%, 50%? Because he's got 245 carries on this season, and he's been just completely taking a pounding from this entire year. He's been phenomenal. You look at him, he's got 18 touchdowns on the year. He's almost got 1,500 yards. He's been a one-man wrecking crew. And take a look at the defense. While they don't have the same name level, Mike Morris, the linebacker, has been great. You look at Junior Colston, linebacker, Michael Barrett, all those guys have had moments this season where they've played really well for the Wolverines. For Ohio State, though, it's going to come down to whether or not this team can impress their will on them. They want to sit there. I need this game to turn into a track meet, and I need Ohio State to come out firing on all cylinders. If the Buckeyes do that, they're going to take I don't even care if Blake Corum's healthy. You're going to take the ball and you're going to put it in J.J. McCarthy's hands. If they put it in McCarthy's hands, that's when I really like Ohio State's possibilities there. Tommy Eichenberg, the linebackers come out of nowhere. Steel Chambers kind of flipped from the running back position this year. Josh Proctor, he's been a great in that secondary as well. Hickman, he's can lower the boom on some people. And then you take a look at guys like Jack Sawyer, JT on the defensive line there. All of those guys have an ability to get to McCarthy, and McCarthy going for his life. There's one interesting thing here, and I've been looking for a lot of things to make me feel better. The first thing I want to see is, and again, Fresh, you're not a wrestling fan, so you won't understand this reference. But every year, there in January, the Royal Rumble happens. And there's always a guy who's been out for injury, and it's like halfway through the Royal Rumble, and his music hit, and the crowd goes nuts. And they pop and they're going, and they're just screaming crazy. That's what I want when Jackson Smith-Njigba comes out. If Jackson Smith-Njigba comes out on Saturday and is ready to play, with having not played this whole season, I think the crowd loses their mind. I don't care if he's just out there for show, but I think if he is able to just go and just, even if he's a decoy, it's going to be an amazing thing. Harrison, all of those guys, they're going to have to play the game of their life because they're going to really need to show that they're ready to take on top tier talent. Ohio State's been struggling as of late. They haven't. I keep wanting them just go in and dominate an opponent, go in and beat the living trash out of them. I don't think you're going to be able to do that to Michigan. I got a lot of respect for the Wolverines. My brother-in-law is a Wolverine, and last year we talked about he got his first taste of winning this game around all of us as well, and it was nice for him. It was nice for him that year. Let's end that this year. I don't want it to be nice for him again this year. So I'm picking the Buckeyes here. I want Ohio State. I think that they're really going to need to get out in front and put the pressure on Michigan very quickly. I want to see JSN out there. Mayan Williams looks like he's going to play. I don't know much about Travion Henderson. That walking boot scared me a little bit. But Dallas Hayden has kind of come out of nowhere being that third string running back and has performed nicely for them. But Ohio State's got to punch them in the mouth. And you got to punch them in the mouth early, and then you got to counter one more time and hit them again. So this is going to be a big one for the Buckeyes. I love it, but it's time. I mean, it's this time fresh, and whew, I can't wait.
I do have a question for you. Being the resident Ohio State fan, if bad things happen in this game and the outcome is not desirable to your liking, does Ryan Day's seat get hot after losing 2 in a row?
No, it won't just yet, because here's the thing. He's delivered some really great recruiting classes.
Agreed. Yes.
The only games he's lost are to Michigan. He has the one loss to Oregon last year. That was a little bit disappointing. But in this game, I think it's going to take a little bit of time. I almost also forgot to say, like Jim Knowles was saying, that he's only shown about 30% of his defense this year. So he has some stuff that they have not even put on tape yet that's going to kind of give Michigan some fits. I don't think so, because how spoiled are we as Ohio State fans? Like, think about this for a second here. John Cooper loses his job back in 1999, I believe it was, or maybe it was like right at January of 2000. And Ohio State takes a risk at hiring Jim Tressel. We go through the Jim Tressel years. He delivers the national title. Ohio State consistently wins. We're always in the mix of it. You can say what you want about 07 and 08 against Florida and LSU, but you're at the championship game. I mean, there's only, at that time in the BCS era, only two teams went to the championship, and you're one of the two. Someone's got to lose that game. You're always in the thick of it. Whatever, I don't even want to call it a scandal anymore, because in today's day and age, that even wouldn't have been a blip on the radar.
Not at all.
You go to Luke Fickell, who was a young coach at the time. I think Fickell has proved that he just wasn't ready for that job yet, and has shown that he is actually a pretty darn good coach. And then you go to Urban Meyer. Say what you want, like, love, hate Urban. He gets you another national title, beats the living bejesus out of Michigan year in and year out. And then you transfer from Urban to Ryan Day, who Ryan Day is winning all of these games. Yeah, he's not meeting the level of expectation of being undefeated, or maybe not always beat Michigan, but he has you in that conversation for the playoff every single year. I don't think this year his seat would get hot, but I think that there would be some conversations being had. Okay, what is it going to take to beat Michigan? I don't think it's going to be a hot seat per se, but I think that there might be a different type of conversation than there has been in years past.
I mean, I honestly agree with you. I think that there's no reason to get all fired up about Ryan Day, his job candidacy, because we've seen there are numerous head coaches out there in programs that are terrible, and it's a tier thing where now you're a victim of your success. If you go 11-1, that's a terrible year, especially since you didn't just lose to like an Indiana, you lost to your rival, and you didn't win a conference championship, and that's where it becomes a pain point. You have to be, I think you hit it right on the spot, like spoiled, where there's certain fan bases where 11-1, you need to sit back and be like, we're 11-1, we're going to New Year's Six Bowl, we are in the conversation for the majority of the year for a national championship. That's success. Because there's only, in the end, there's only one team that can win a national title. You have to be fortunate and respectful of what you have in that program, and don't get too greedy, because if you get greedy, then that's where disaster, I think, karma comes into play and beats you down. I mean, 2 in a row to Michigan is nothing to get too mad about. I think if it was 3 in a row or 4, then maybe you start having that talk, especially if that's the only thing keeping you there. But I think Ryan Day's done a great job, and he's, of all things I mentioned, the most impressive was he's changed his offensive philosophy this year a little more focused on the running of the football. You've seen it from the past years, we're a little more pass heavy, especially last year. He learned from last year, I have to run the football, especially when the weather changes, to be able to win in all different elements. And if it snows on Saturday, having a stable of running backs and being confident in that running attack is going to be very beneficial.
Yeah, and I keep thinking about, like, going back to the early 2000s here, fresh. Look at Texas after they fired Mac Brown and they went into doldrums. They still are scraping and clawing to pull themselves up. Look at Tennessee. It's how long has it taken for Tennessee to get back to kind of this stage that they're at since they fired Phil Fulmer? And then even a place like Auburn. Auburn, where they played for 2 national titles, and now they're onto another coach. Or Florida. Urban leaves Florida. They have all of these other guys trying to come in. They're always trying to find the magic thing. I go back to the old saying: the devil I know is better than the devil I don't. And yeah, it's one thing if Ryan Day was losing 3 games a year. That's a different story. We can have a different conversation. But if it's just one, and that makes me nervous. But again, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to have that conversation. I think he's a great coach, and I actually think there's a lot of people who don't understand how much work he has done in the mental health community, especially for children's mental health. He's he's a From what everything I've read and seen, he seems like he's a pretty good dude out there and does do a lot of community service out there. So a lot of respect to him on that regards as well. So I don't know. I'm not ready for that, but this is going to be a great weekend. Fresh. It's an exciting one. It's the best weekend in college football, and I can't wait for it.
I mean, Rivalry Weekend, it's fun because you still have the hangover, that turkey coma from Thursday. You have little appetizer on Friday with some games, and then you get the full buffet on Saturday. It's a great time.
So, I want to thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. We're part of Spinnable Sports, so make sure you go to spinnablesports.com. Yep, that is spinnablesports.com. Checking out everything that is out there. I want to send a special thank you to our producer, Drew. Without him, none of this is possible, so thank you to him. And if wherever you're getting your podcast, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Good Pods, Amazon Pods, Google Pods, I don't know them all, folks. Subscribe, leave us that 5-star review because you guys know Fresh and I, we're those 5-star prospects. If you're watching this on the YouTube, make sure that you are subscribing to the Spinnable Sports channel. Hit that notification bell because you don't want to miss anything we got coming forward. It's going to alert you every single time we drop a new episode. So make sure you subscribe to that channel, notify yourself because, you can't help but look at these two handsome gentlemen right here. So, folks, it's been a heck of a ride. We're at the end of the regular season. It's gone by way too fast. I still can't believe it because it still feels like it was just yesterday we were recording our preseason top 25.
All right, that preseason top 25, I think more than none we got pretty correct. So I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, we'll have to go when this is all said and done. We'll have to go back and look and see what we got right and felt good about, and you know, we ain't gonna miss.
I think a swing and a miss episode would be a lot of fun.
That would be fun. All right, folks. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving from all of us here at the Irrational Confidence Podcast and Spinnable Sports. We love you all. Thank you all. We're thankful for you, and we will catch you next time.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Bye, y'all.